Start recording. Okay. Hello, I'm recording this class because we're going over rigging and it's very important. So, does everyone have a leg? We have a leg. Fantastic. So, here's a preview of what it looks like rigged as just a leg. Over my outliner, you can see I have a character folder, and inside of that, I've separated this so that it makes more sense. All of my meshes are going to be in one folder. So if I have multiple things, like if I have clothing, or if I have a hat, or if I have glasses on my character, I can just put it into the mesh folder. I have my rig folder, which has all of my bones. So I've got thigh bone, shin bone, foot, toe, toe tip, and my IK handle, which we'll get to. I also have a character control folder. So these are my actual controls. This is the thing that's going to be nice to animate with, because I made myself a little foot control down here. So I can make them run, and I can rotate this foot as needed. And up here I can grab him and he can squat. And up here I have a knee control that kind of points the knee in the direction I want it to go. So I'm going to hide this. And I'm going to start again from scratch. So I'm going to import my leg model. Just a simple leg. I've got a little patch in front on the knee, so it'll help with bending. A little bit more pinched in the back, so it'll help with the crease in the back of the knee. So, first thing I want you to do is, in the viewport, go to shading and turn on X-ray joints. This will allow it so that your joints will be able to show through your model. That way it's not inside all the time. And I'm going to go to my side view, so I'm going to press spacebar and come into my side view here of my leg. I'll do the same thing here, just turn on X-ray joints. I like placing my bones in either a front or a side view just because it'll lock it onto one of the planes and then I can just readjust it later. Up at the top left, if you're in modeling mode, we're going to switch it over to rigging mode. And then down here in the rigging tab, we have all these options. We talked about the constraints before. We've got your parent, orient, point, scale, aim, all that good stuff. We've also got some bones, locators, skin, auto rigs. So we're going to go over to the bones, create joints, and that'll activate this tool. You can see it highlighted down here on the left. And wherever I click, it's going to add a bone. So I'm going to start at the top of the leg and click. And then I'm going to go to the knee, somewhere in the middle here, wherever it's going to rotate from. That's the main point of rigs, is wherever it's going to rotate from is where you want to place it. So for the ankle, I don't want it to happen down on my heel, because that's not where our foot actually rotates from. I'm going to put it here in my ankle, kind of at the top of the foot where the end of your leg is. Oops. I'll do one kind of down here for kind of the ball of the foot where the toe starts to come out, and then I'll do one more over here for the toe. And if I'm good with that, you can hit enter, or you can just click onto another selection tool. So now I have my bones. Now some of these are kind of large for bones. They're kind of hard to work with. This is really hard to grab. You can see this huge triangle jutting out here. In our attribute settings, down under joint, whatever one we have selected, we can change the radius of this bone. So instead of 0.5, I could do something like 0.2, and that's a much more manageable size for a toe, or if you're doing fingers or a thumb. I'll do the same thing for this one. Something smaller, something that makes sense. And we could also readjust these points around And I'm gonna have this end joint kind of barely sticking out of the end of the toe. Question.
Is there a movie picture or is it
Yeah. If you hold down Alt like you're rotating around and right click and drag.
Can I move a bone once it's been set?
Yes, you can move a bone once it's been set. When you're moving bones, make sure you start from the furthest back you need it to move it from. So if I need to adjust the whole leg, make sure you're doing it here, because this, as we talked about, is an FK rig, a forward kinematics. If I move this, it moves everything attached to it. So go down and make sure that the knee is good. If that looks fine, go down and make sure the ankle is good. Then you can make sure the ball is good. You can make sure the toe is good. So just start from the highest chain and work your way down. Question? Over in shading, is it set to X-ray joints? Aha. Yeah, if you have X-ray joints turned off, it looks like this, and it's very hard to work with. There's also just general X-ray, which looks like that, so it kind of makes your model slightly transparent. But I like the joint one because it makes everything else normal looking and only the joints show through. So I'm going to go back into this mode, and you'll have to set this in every view that you want it to be in, because each of these views is independent. So you can see my front view here does not have X-ray joints turned on. And I'm just going to rotate around my leg, and if it looks pretty good, if it's kind of centered in there, then we're good to go. If you need to adjust it, you can adjust it.
One of my bones is slightly rotated. Is that going to be a problem?
We're going to talk about rotation. So let me select my bones, and you'll notice inside of here, every bone has a little gimbal that has X, Y, and Z axis on it. For proper rigging, we really want to aim to have these all the same. So here we can see the red is pointing down. Turn off this. The red is pointing down, and the blue is pointing to the side, and the green is pointing forward. So here on the knee, you can see it is not the same. It's pointing to the opposite side, and the green is pointing back. So these bones are rolled in different orientations because we're moving them around as we're setting them up. But there's a really nifty tool to fix that up in our skeleton tab, which you can only get if you're in rigging mode, so make sure you're in your rigging mode. But it's called Orient Joints. I'm going to click that, and then just check it again. So now you can see I've got green facing down, red facing front. Green facing down, red facing front.
What should I click on before clicking?
I'm just going to click on the upmost joint. So in this case, my thigh. And then orient joint. And looking at this now, you can see that green is facing down the rig. Again, even though the foot is turned here, that green is still facing down the chain. You can click on the box by orient joints and go into the options here, because you can set what you want the primary axis to be. And you can set what you want your secondary to be. So if that works, then fantastic. Yeah, pretty much all the options in these menus have like sub options. So if it doesn't work just on your initial click, you can go into the options and see what's going on there. Yeah, so even though this is pointing forward, if we're looking at the direction of the chain of bones, that's the main thing to look at. So green is pointing down the chain. Even though this is turned, the green is still pointing down the chain. This is pointing down the chain. The toe doesn't really matter so much because I'm not really going to be using this for like grabbing it and moving it around because it's not attached to anything. This is just the end point, so that one is less of a concern. If you really wanted to, you could orient this so that it's facing the right way. But I think it'll be fine just because this is the main bone I'm going to be using for the toe. Yeah, this is all just nice cleanup stuff. The other thing I'm going to do over my outliner is I'm going to name my bones, because joint 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5 are not very good names for bones. So I'm going to name them for what they are. The topmost one I'm going to call thigh, and if it's the left or the right leg, you can put like an underscore L. So let's say this is a left leg. This one is the shin. So I'll call it shin left. Next one is the foot. And just distinguish for yourself whether it's left or right. Toe. Yeah, this last joint I'm not really going to be using for animation. It's just the end joint, so you could call it like end left, or sometimes I'll call it like toe tip L. So that's much nicer to look at, right? This makes sense. While we're over here in the outliner, why don't we do some cleanup work? If you select off of, so have nothing selected, and just hit Command G, it'll make an empty group. And we're gonna make a couple groups. This first one, we're just gonna, you'll name this as your character. So in this case, maybe this is my leg character. That's just the big general group for it. I'll click off again, make another group. Maybe this one is leg mesh. Click off, I'll make another one. Leg rig. Command G. And leg control. We're gonna make this nice and easy on ourselves. I've got character, I've got leg mesh, I have leg rig, and I have my leg controls. So my mesh, I'm gonna middle click and drag that into my mesh folder. If I expand that, you can see it's in there. My bones, I'm going to middle mouse drag into rig. You can see that's in here now if I expand that all the way. And then control, rig, and mesh, I'm gonna drag those three groups into my character. And you can arrange those how you like. Usually I like to have mesh control then rig, but totally up to you. So now we're organized. All right, so I could, from this point, I could just bind the skin of the mesh to this rig and it would be ready to go and animate. But this, as I said, is an FK control, so I would have to animate it joint by joint throughout the entire thing. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna expand my bones over here because we're gonna use our outliner to select things. And right next to where we create joints, we can create an IK handle. So I'm gonna click on that. I'm gonna do this more than once so you can see it. I'm gonna click on that so I have the tool activated. And then wherever you want to be able to grab from, we're gonna start there and we'll control click onto where we want that chain to end. So we want to be able to grab it from the foot. So I'm going to click on that, because that's what I want to grab from. And we want it to go up to the leg. So I'm going to control click on the thigh. And now I have this IK handle, so you can see it's changed shape. It's got this little circle up top. And I'm going to do it one more time so you can see it, but just so you can see how it works, now I can grab it from that IK handle. So let me do it one more time. So right now it is FK. I'm going to grab my IK tool. I'm going to select from where I want to be able to grab my rig from. To the end of the chain. In this case, I want to grab it from my foot. And I'm going to control click or command click if you're on Mac. Either way. And I'm going to click on the bone that I want to end at, which in this case is my thigh. So it's going from here to the thigh. And it's saying, I want this to be affected. You can see my effector here. By my IK handle. So this effector is on the same level as my foot.
Oh, there it goes. Okay, I can't even do it. Could you, like, in layman's terms, explain exactly what the IK handle does?
Yes. So instead of going down the chain and having to rotate it joint by joint down, what the IK handle does is it kind of skips all that and just gives you one control point, and then it'll bend everything else according to how long those bones are. The way it determines the direction it should bend is if there is a slight bend in one direction, it'll prefer that direction. So if your leg is slightly bent backward, it looks straight but it's slightly this way, it will bend that way. Bird leg. So usually you'll want to have it ever so slightly bent in one direction.
Something I'll never recover, and I think it was from your class when you said that horses are like got human legs and then like ostrich legs in the back, something like that. I think that was from you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what they are.
I'll never recover from that.
Are you selecting all the bones, or are you selecting just the main bone that everything's attached to?
All the bones except
Just, yeah, when you're moving the bones, just select the highest one. Because everything else will follow with it if it's already attached. Otherwise, it'll break your hierarchy. You can reset your hierarchy. You can just drag the bones back in order. Like if I drag this effector out of this hierarchy, it'll break my IK handle. But if I drag it back into this position, then it'll fix it again. Because this is just pointing at what it wants to follow. All right, so we're getting there. Yeah. I'm gonna have you guys make two things, just so we can move forward one step. I want you to make a locator,
Okay.
which is in the rigging tab. This little guy. And we're gonna put him kind of in front of the knee, off to the side here. And this could be any object. I'm just using a locator because it's easy to grab. But this is going to be our control for the knee. Pretty neat. The other thing I'm going to want you to make is a curve over in the curves tab, and just make a curved circle. And I'm gonna move I'm gonna hit snap to points so that it will for the knee control in the rigging tab, there's an object called a locator. and I just moved it in front of my leg, just in front of the knee,
Okay.
and I named it control knee, because that's what it's gonna do eventually. Actually, I'll show you a fun shortcut for getting this exactly where you want. So I want to move this exactly where this bone is. So I'm going to select this, and then I'm going to, I might as well just do it in here. I'll command select my foot. And then under modify, I can match my transformations. Match translation, so it'll move it exactly in that spot. So you can use that for any object. If you select something and then you select a second object and then go to modify and match transformations, you can do it with scaling, rotation, or translation, or all of them. I'm just doing it with translation. It'll move it to exactly the position of that second object, which is what I want, because I want it to rotate from here.
So, I click on the curve,
Yep.
then input.
Yep.
Okay.
Curve, foot, or ankle, and then you can go to modify and match transformations.
Where's the nerve curve?
Under curves and surfaces, there's a circle right on the left.
Do I connect it to anything now, or is it just there?
The circle?
Yeah.
The only thing I've done is I've just moved it to the same exact location as my foot.
How do I do that?
You can select your, so if I move it off screen here, or offside, select an object and then select a second object. In this case, I'm going to select my curve, and then I'm going to select my foot, and then go to modify, match transformations, and then match translation.
Oh wow, that's very useful.
Yeah, it just snaps it right onto that spot.
Which of the nerves are you
Modify, match transformations, match translation.
Should the nerve circle be different?
We are going to name the nerve circle. We're going to call it control for the foot. So we have a knee control and a foot control. I'm going to move both of those into my that group that we made before called leg control. Just going to move them into there. So now I have one folder that has all my controls in it.
Why would I handle those two?
The IK I'm actually going to stick in my leg rig. So that'll stay its own thing. So we have our control for the foot here. If you want to get really fancy, you can go to the modeling menu and modify the points if you wanted to like grab those and like shape it into more of a foot shape. I can move it down here. The important thing is that I'm not moving the rotation points. If I'm just moving the vertices, then my rotation point will stay the same. So I'll just make a little oval.
How do I? What am I doing?
So something like that. Just approximately.
It's off center in a way that's like it's facing a different direction. Do I need to repeat it? Or is that correct?
So long as you are, if you want to move the control, so long as you are moving the points and not the object, you'll be fine. Because if I move it in the object select, it's going to be moving that rotation point.
Oh, right.
And I don't want to move that, because that's where I want it to rotate from. But if I select the points, then it's kind of like modifying your geometry. It's not affecting your axis.
Oh, it's going up, it's going up.
So you can modify that to whatever shape you please. You don't have to, but if you like. All right. There is one more constraint that we have not talked about in the rigging tab. We've talked about parent constraints, where the child does everything the parent does. We talked about point constraints, where the child will move wherever the parent does. We've talked about orient, which is where it will rotate where the parent does. Scale, it scales like the parent does. Aim, it aims at the parent. The very last one is called a pole vector constraint, and it is specifically for IK handles. So I'm going to select my knee control as my parent. I'm going to select over here my IK handle as my child. And we're going to do a pole vector constraint. And we should see a little line jump to this.
I can't see the IK handle, so I can't like select one and then select the other right away without like going through a lot of other things.
Yeah, so mine is located within my leg rig because I moved it inside of that folder.
But like, wait.
And then we click the vector.
I can't select the knee and then the IK handle because the IK handle was in the leg rig, and so if I shift click it.
Don't shift click. Use command.
Oh.
So command will not. So if I shift, it'll select everything in between. But if I click and then hit command and click, it'll just grab those two.
Thank you so much. That helps me all the time.
Yeah.
And then what do we click on?
So we're clicking on the knee control and then the IK handle,
Right.
and then the pole vector constraint. Again, this is specifically for IKs, and what it does, if I move my IK handle now, and then I go over here, this allows me to change the direction of my knee. Isn't that nifty?
Let's see.
Why is my button
So I selected my knee control, I selected my IK handle, and I did a pole vector constraint. Again, this is specifically for IK handles, which is what we created. And it is aiming my...
So how do I test this? What do I click on? Test it?
So for testing, I just grabbed my IK and kind of made my knee bend, and then it can grab my knee control, and if I move that around, it should change the direction of your leg.
Well,
So this IK handle is kind of a pain to select, right?
Yes.
It's kind of locked in there. That's the whole reason I have the foot control, so that's what we're going to set up next. This is probably the easiest parent, because I'm going to set this as the parent, and I'm going to select my IK handle as the child, and we're just going to do a regular parent.
Control foot, I can handle.
That way, whenever I move this control, it just moves the IK handle.
My foot isn't my foot control isn't totally level with the ground. Is that a problem?
That's fine. It should function the same way. This is just me being like professional
The commands
rig.
IK handle. So control foot, IK handle, and then regular parent.
Yep. So our control for the foot is the parent, and the IK handle is the child, and it's just a simple parent constraint. You can go to the constraint menu and hit parent, or this little icon here. So anything that this does,
Oh hey.
that will do.
Hey. It was wonky.
Isn't that neat? Now you don't have to go into your menu every time. All right, we're gonna do one more. I'm gonna select my foot control again as the parent, and I'm gonna select my foot bone as the child, and we're gonna do an orient constraint Because right now, if I move this around, you can see that the foot kind of like stays facing with the shin, which is going to make it really hard to walk because I'm going to have to rotate that foot every single time. So I'm going to select control for the foot as the parent, the foot bone as the child, and do an orient constraint. And now if I move my foot control, my foot should stay flat. Did this happen after you did the orient constraint? Okay, so undo that and then go into your constraint menu and then click on the options for orient constraint. Make sure that maintain offset is turned on. That's the important thing. Because we don't want the rig to move to the foot control. We just want it to follow it. Really, this option should be checked on for pretty much every constraint that you apply. You can open them by the little box offside, whichever one that you're working with. So anytime you see a box in any of these menus, that's for extra options for that control.
At least one argument's to be here.
Yeah, so make sure that when you're doing the orient that it is the bone that you want to rotate with it. So if I did it with my toe bone, only the toe would rotate with that control. So now we have a rig. The last thing you need to do is select your leg mesh and then select your thigh, and then up here we can bind skin.
Like leg mesh? And just the thigh and the leg.
Yep, because the thigh connects everything together.
And where's bind skin?
And it looks like these bones with like a little outline around them. You can also go into the skin menu and bind skin.
Oh, hey, whoa.
And now,
Whoa.
whoop-a-pa-pow!
Just twist a little bit, but it won't take
Is it rotating? Is it rotating like this?
Yeah.
This happens, so this is how the knee control works. Once this IK handle passes, because remember, the IK handle is pointing at the knee control. Once this passes that control, it is doing its job. It is pointing at the control, but that's probably not what you want, right? So to fix that, just move your knee control further out.
Okay.
Le leg. Oui, oui.
Wonderful.
Oui, oui, baguette. So what's really, really cool about IK rigs is not only can I grab it from the bottom, I can also grab it from the top joint here and make him squat down.
Yay! Let's work. Perfect.
Yeah, so save this. That's how you make a leg rig. That's probably the most that's one of the more complex parts of it. If you had a full arm with like fingers and stuff, it's the exact same setup because you start at the shoulder and you go down to the wrist, and that's where the IK is, and then you have a hand control that you move around, and then your fingers are kind of independent, kind of like your toes are independent on this. Some of your characters don't even have feet, so you might only need like the thigh bone and the shin bone, and that would be totally fine.
I have little stubby boots.
Or you might just need 1, 2, and then just one bone for the foot. So you can simplify it even more. Again, it's as complicated as you want it to be. I can go even more in depth with this. I'll go into this in 3D2 when we do humanoid characters. You actually can have both an IK rig and an FK rig in the same model and switch between them. So if you need it to be one or the other. Yeah, it's true. With a humanoid model, you could just do auto rig, and it will give you all those controls. Yeah. So if you have a tail on a character, let me show you. Let me just paint some other ones real quick, just for an example. So let's say I had a tail. Ba-boom. and I want to be able to grab the end of the tail and move it around. I can use my IK. So let me expand this just so it's a little cleaner to work with. Grab my IK control, and I want to start at the end, and I want it to end up here. It's the exact same thing. So even though this is a longer chain, I can now move this tail around as one unit. Or like if this were like a dinosaur neck or like a bird neck, wouldn't this be so much easier to grab the head and move it around? And I could swing it around back and forth, and I could even put a pole vector constraint to like have it so you can like orient it back and forth as well.
How many joints do you need to make something move like fluidly like a snake?
The amount of joints really just depends on the model. Usually you want to put a joint wherever it's gonna bend. Obviously, the human spine has a lot of vertebrae in it, but not every one of those vertebrae is going to be bending around. Usually for human spines, you'll get between like 3 and 5 bones for flexibility, and that's really all you would need, because our spines aren't that flexible. Another thing you could do, let's say you have like deer legs. Let me do a side view here, and let's say we've got the hip here, and then it kind of goes forward, back, and then down, and then this is my foot down here. I can do the exact same thing. I can take my IK, and I can select what I want. I'm gonna expand this guy again. I'll start here, and I'll end here. Hello? Hang on. Here to here. There we go. And now, if I move this IK handle around, it's moving kind of like a dinosaur leg or like a deer leg or like some kind of, what are they called? The digigrade legs. And it's going to orient whichever way that joint is bent. And again, I could do the exact same foot rig down here. I could have this orient the same way as my foot control. I could compare that to here. I can have a knee control, and that would point it in that direction, because it's not pointing the knee, it's pointing this thing. It's pointing the IK handle at it. So it doesn't matter how many joints you have. I could go crazy. I could just do zigzags as much as I want. If you had like a machine rig, like kind of Inspector Gadget style, where it kind of like scissors out, you could have a rig like that and have an IK handle at the end. And then you don't have to animate every single bone. That's the power of rigging. That doesn't matter. So save that. You have it as a reference. And I'm gonna jump over into Blender, and I'm gonna do the exact same thing. So Blender is a little bit different. Got different controls, and I still have this weird glitch where I can't get to the file menu. But I'm gonna import my OBJ. There's my leg. And there it is. Ain't it lovely? The way that bones work in here is you add an armature object, just a single bone. And you can see it in X right here, down here. Your entire character's rig is going to be contained in this armature object. So that's how it keeps. This is what's nice about Blender, is that it will keep your outliner clean, because your entire character's rig is going to be inside of this object. The way that you edit the bones is by going into edit mode. And I can select the ends of these bones individually and move them around.
Okay.
So I can select the end here, I can hit G, grab it, move it around, or if I want to hit G and then Z, I can move it on that axis. But it's the exact same process. I'm going to move this kind of toward where my ankle's gonna be.
Hold on, this is that. Where does the OBJ
You go to File, then Import, and then Wavefront OBJ.
No, I mean the other
If you go to, in object mode, if you go to Add Armature,
Oh.
and then just single bone. Are you in object mode?
Oh, there it is.
And then if you select that bone and go into edit mode, you'll be able to move it around. What's cool about Blender is that if I have a single bone like this, I can right click on it and subdivide it. And now I have my leg joint, or like if I were doing a tail, I could stretch this bone out from the beginning of the tail to the end. And then hit subdivide as many times as I like. You can see the subdivide menu here, so I can have 2, 3, 4 cuts. Yeah, I'm turning on X-ray mode at the top here, because otherwise, it's kind of like the X-ray joints in Maya. This is really hard to work with for me. If you want to extrude a bone, you can hit E, and there we go. So I'm gonna put a little foot bone there. I'll extrude again. I'll give myself a little toe bone. Pretty nice, right? A little bit different. So now I have my bones in place, and I'm gonna move this guy down a little bit because I want this to bend at the knee. Want that to bend at the ankle. The other thing, here's the major difference I love about Blender. Look what I can do. Notice how I can grab this at any point and it doesn't screw up any of the other points. That is a time saver. Somebody worked really hard to code that function in. Okay, so I'm just gonna rotate around, make sure that everything is looking okay. That's fine. In fact, you probably want it to stick out of the leg a little bit. Because if you imagine this had the rest of the human model, you would have the hips here. Your hips, if you look at a femur, the ball joint is not like directly at the top of your femur bone. It's kind of off to the side of it, into your pelvis.
How do I add another bone to the
So if you select any joint, you can hit E and it'll extrude. So here's something else I'm gonna do. We're gonna set up some of our other controls beforehand. So I'm gonna select my knee and I'm gonna extrude over here. If you want, you can hit X or whatever axis it is on to make it straight. This is gonna be my knee control eventually. I'm going to do the same thing for the heel down here, or the ankle, or the foot, or wherever you want to label it. E, and then whatever axis it's on, you can read it at the top here. So X, Y, Z. Mine is on the X, so I'm going to put X. And just give myself a little heel control. And we'll change the look of these later. I'm not adding any control buttons yet. I'm just extruding bones.
Oh, so the bone is
Yep, just extrude a bone out of the knee and one out of the heel. And then down on the right here, we actually have a bone menu. And under relations, we can set these bones to have different relationships to this mesh. So a normal bone is going to have, so like this shin here is going to have a parent. It's parented to this guy. And it's going to deform that model whenever I skin it, because that's what I want it to do. For this knee, I don't want it to be parented to anything right now. And I also don't want it to deform, because this is just going to be used as kind of a point.
I don't see the local relation. I don't see any of those options.
It is under this bone menu.
Oh.
It looks like a little cartoon bone, and under relations.
So we don't want it to.
We don't want it to have a parent on the knee, and we don't want it to deform our model. We're going to use this as what to point toward. And then I'm just going to move it out, kind of like we did before. Same thing for my heel. I don't want it to have a parent, and I don't want it to deform my model. I'm actually not going to move it right now, because I still want it to rotate around that point. But I just want to be able to grab that and move it around, right?
Oh. It still is connected to the rest of the bone. I'm trying to move it out. Oh wait, I'm not supposed to move it out.
Yeah, I'm not moving out the heel. Just gonna do that to begin with. And then with bones, we've talked about object mode, we've talked about edit mode. There's also a pose mode with bones. This is where all your animation for your characters will happen if you're doing it in Blender. Because from here, I can R and rotate this around. And I can R and rotate this around. So, like I said before, rigging is as complex as you need it to be. I could, if I just have a little nub leg, I could just do a bone, and then skin the model, and that's it. That's all I would need. Could be as simple as that. Hello. So we've talked about the modifier menu for meshes. For bones, we've got the object constraint menu, which works very similarly. And this is where all of our stuff from Maya is. So that like copy location or parenting, so like this is the child of something, or stretch to your aim constraints. All of that stuff is located in one menu. So if we want to make an IK, I can go and there we go. Where is it? Oh wait, it's down here. This menu. Underneath bones. Bone constraint, that's what I want. Inverse kinematics. And I haven't defined anything yet, so it's not going to do anything. But for our target, we want it to be our armature, our skeleton. And what bone do we want to attach this to? I'm actually going to attach it to... Before I do that, why don't I label these bones?
Yeah.
I think that would be a wise thing to do. We can delete this for now, so I can figure out where I am. Call that thigh. Shin. Knee. Heel. Foot. Toe. There we go. That's much easier to read, right?
Much.
So, I want to end down here. So I'm going to select this bone. Add my constraints for inverse kinematics. What do I want to target? I want to target my skeleton. Which bone do I want it to follow? I want it to follow my heel.
Play target archer. Here.
So that whenever I move this heel, it moves the thing.
Oh, the heel control? Like what?
Yeah, this bone that we
Okay.
brought out.
Yeah,
Um,
close to-
and then for the chain length, you could define how many bones up this chain you want it to affect.
Is that two?
Ooh, ooh, wee.
These are a little wonky.
So you can see it is working. It's bending my leg, but it's having some trouble
Very wobbly.
because I haven't given it anything to aim toward, right?
And how are you moving
Hmm?
How are you moving
G for grab. So in Maya, we have that QWER where your hand rests for that translate, rotate, scale. In Blender, the shortcuts are G to grab, R to rotate, S to scale.
I'm not sure if there's anything that I do most of that
Do you have the target? So I'm selecting this bone again, my shin. Do you have the target as the armature? The heel is the bone. How far up the chain are you wanting it to follow? Because if you have it set to 0, it's not going to do much. So we want to follow 1, 2 bones up that chain. So if I had more bones, if I had like a deer leg, I might have 3 bones up that chain. That's just however far you want the end of that to be. Huh. I'll have to take a look at yours in a bit. For that pole vector constraint, that's what this is for. We want our target to be our skeleton. Which bone do we want it to follow? We want it to follow our knee. And you might notice that my foot has rotated to the side a bit. If that happens, you can change the pole angle. So I'm going to change it to -90 to get it back in place. So all of that is located under just one modifier that we've placed on our bone.
Whoa.
Just not working now for some reason. Let me go back into my edit mode and just give this just a slight bend and see if that helps. There we go.
It's only letting me rotate the bones out. It's not letting me move them. And I'm using G, but it's still just rotating.
If you go over to the left here and hit the move control, will it let you?
On, but it's still only letting me rotate them. It's
Yeah, mine was not the way I fixed mine is I went back into edit mode and I just gave it a slight bend in one direction because I realized the reason it wasn't bending is because it didn't have a preferred direction to go towards. Kind of like what was happening before in Maya. If it's bending slightly in one direction, that's the direction it's going to favor.
I don't know why I fixed that.
If you go back into edit mode, this is also nice in Blender is you can go back into edit mode
It
and
is slightly bent, though.
and move these joints around and then go back into pose mode. So you should be able to move with our heel and then our knee joint will let it bend. I will be uploading this recording as well as some other tutorials over the exact same thing so you can follow along.
I'm lost.
Okay. Let me get through this and then we can go back. Okay. So I can move this guy around But this is kind of an issue, right? Where it kind of disconnects from the heel here. We want that to stay with our foot. So what we can do is I can go back into my edit mode. And I can select my foot here. And this is different from Maya because we are selecting our child and then telling it what the active parent is. I can hit Command P for parent, and I can keep that offset. And now when I move it in pose mode, it'll stay with my control. So again, I selected this foot, selected the heel control, and then hit Command P and maintain offset. But now we have the other problem where it's kind of disconnecting from the rest of it, right? And we don't really want that. So we can fix that by grabbing our foot guy down here. And we can copy the location. We want it to be on a skeleton. And I'm going to follow the shin. And you can see it's following this bone now, but it's following it at the wrong end. There's this nice head to tail slider. So I can just move that back up. And now, stay nice and locked. If I wanted to, if I want to change the look of these controls to something else, like let's say I want to make a curve, kind of like we did with the foot control. In object mode, I can make those objects. I can make a curved circle. I'll just move it over here, and I'll make 2 of them. Shape this guy into kind of a foot shape. Again, I'm just going into edit mode. It's kind of an oval. And I'll just use a circle for my knee shape. Select a bone. There we go. So on the bone, if you want it to appear as a different object, under viewport display, I can set it as a custom object. So now it is a circle. And I can rotate that around whichever way I need it to. Do 90 degrees. And I can adjust that to be like my foot slider. Same thing here. If I go to my bone options, I can set viewport display to a custom shape. If I want it just to be a circle. You can have this be whatever objects you like, and then I can even delete these 2, and they'll stay that way. So now for animation, I can grab this guy down here, move him around. I can grab this knee control and I can move that around. And then to bind the skin, super easy. Select your mesh and your skeleton, and then Control P or Command P, and you can parent it with automatic weights. Okay, going back in the pose mode, this should now bend like a leg. Same exact rig, 2 different programs. And I'm going to upload tutorials for both of them along with this class recording because I know rigging is complicated and takes time to learn. But I can rotate it, I can make him tap his foot. I just went into object mode, and then I just selected the mesh that I want it to deform, and I select the armature that I want it to do it with, and just hit Command P for parent, and you can deform. There's armature deform, and then I just did automatic weights. So it'll just give me the default. I can move that guy around. For your models as well, so the reason it bends this way is, let me show you in weight paint mode. This is how your model thinks about how to bend. Is every one of these bones has an influence on the mesh. So that's how it works. So that bone is saying whenever this bone bends, it's going to bend this 100%. And it's going to be slightly bent, kind of a gradient at the knee down here. Pretty typical for any joint. It's going to be red in the middle and gradient toward the sides. Foot down there, toe down there. So no matter what your object is, if it's like a hand with fingers, every joint's going to kind of look like that, where every finger joint would be red in the middle and kind of gradient on the knuckles. You can go in and weight paint this. I'm not going to worry about that too much for your guys' stuff. But kind of like texture painting, you can go in and paint on this model, and now whenever the toe bends, my thigh will bend, which is kind of ugly. But I could also go in here if something were like influencing too much on something. I could blur it, or I could use the smear tool and kind of soften it up a little bit. So you can see I've softened up that edge a little more. Or like on my knee, if I wanted a bit more softness in the front here, I could use this blur tool and kind of go in the front here and soften it up a little bit. If I need to return this to its original position, the bone itself has location information, so if I just zero that out, I'll just bring it back to the beginning. Question?
Say I complete this build and I want to create another one from the lane, or I can copy.
Right, so for a full like character. Let me go into that by showing you my character. I'll show you the rigged one first, and then I'll go through my process. So here's a little mush man. He needs some weight painting done because you can see the leg has a little bit too much influence here. It's kind of pushing up that geometry. But again, I could fix that later on. But he works. And he's got little custom controls, so I've just substituted a curve object for those bones. I can go into pose mode, and I can select these, and I can wiggle him around. So I could bring this guy down here. Okay, rotate it around so it's kind of flat again. Tap his toes. This is what he will look like eventually, and I can make him jiggle and twerk to my heart's delight.
Dang, Chica. All Chica.
Actually,
What you doing with all this out?
actually be probably would be doing it on the x-axis. There we go. This is what animation's all about, right? And then I've got this little whoop.
Going to X-ray board and we'll see what volume is
The bones? These are the bones. He's got a couple in there.
like. Okay.
He's got a few. So for these little nubs, I really don't need anything more than just one bone, right? So I just did that. For his feet, I just did 1, 2, 3, and then the IK goes from here to here. Got my little control down here.
Okay.
You can also, in the armature menu, you can make bone groups, so you can assign things to groups and like colorize it. One of the videos I will be posting today goes over that, so if you want to be extra organized and like color coordinate stuff. I also have this control, which lets me move the whole character. The way I did that was in edit mode, I just made another bone and put it down here and just made that the uber parent of everything, and then changed out the display of it to a curve object that I made. What's cool about that though is that I can actually rescale my character.
Make an army of them.
Yeah.
So for little characters with like for stubs, you probably
Probably. These guys also have some constraint modifiers on them because I just tacked these eyeballs on. I just made them the parent, or sorry, I made them the child, and the parent is my mesh here. But specifically, I made a vertex group, which you can do in edit mode down here. You can create vertex groups and assign points. So I just made a point here, and that's the only thing in that group. So that eye is just parented to that single point. And this is also a... Which one is this? Copy scale. So this is copying the scale of my body control down here, so the eyes will scale with it. Because if I don't do that, what ends up happening is when I scale up, my eyes don't scale with it. Which is kind of fun, because then I could have a small guy and then he looks kind of cute. But I wanted it to scale with the model. Anyway, that's all advanced stuff. You don't need to worry about that too much. But let me open up the pre-rigged version of this guy. So you can see the process of rigging here. So this is my bone setup. Let me just get these out of the way here so I can mirror it over for you. But I can select my bones over on this side, and then in edit mode, if you're working with bones, there's an armature tab, and you can you can symmetrize. And that'll just copy everything on this side over here. But, big but, the way to get symmetrize to work, make sure that you label your bones with left or right. Because otherwise, that's what it's going to look for. It's going to look for a capital L or a capital R. If you don't label it, it doesn't know that you want it to be the same but opposite on the other side. Typically the cleaner workflow for labeling bones in Blender is just put a .L or a .R at the end of it. again, the videos I'm going to post for you guys are going to go over all of that as well, so you can watch through them at your own pace. Question?
Is there a way to link like a mesh to have it grow when the bow moves?
To grow when the bow moves.
Yeah. Or is that too
I'm just trying to think of an example for you. For you.
almost like
Yes, you can.
Okay.
I don't know how to set that up in Blender per se,
Okay.
but I suppose you could. What do you want to grow with a bone?
Just the feet for like exaggerating, like say he jumps, or exaggerating those limbs of it.
Oh, like stretching.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, that's different.
Okay. Sorry.
I thought you meant like scaling the model as
No,
you're
no.
moving it. But yeah, if you grab the end of a bone and move it around, it will deform your mesh with it.
Okay.
So, unless you lock the length of your bones, you can just move them around however you want.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there another question? I've got this guy, and I could just skin this right now as is. Again, rigging is as complicated as you need it to be, but I can go through that whole process again. Question? No. So here's what I did for that. Let me delete this guy. And then from here, let's say to get this bone, what I did was I just extruded off to where I want the joint to be, and then I extruded off again for this guy, and then I just deleted that because I don't need to be able to grab that bone. I just need to be able to grab my arm. But you can also just like select this and then select what you want it to parent to, and then hit Command P and keep offset, and you can see it's now it's parented to that bone. So it just has a little dot there. So I wanted everything to be attached to my pelvis bone here. And that's usually what you want for your characters, is the hips are going to drive everything, because that's kind of where all of your bones come out of. Your spine goes up out of your hips and branches off into limbs and a head. And then it goes from the hips down, it branches off into legs. And if you have a tail, it would branch off into a tail from there. So if this guy had a tail, the way I would do that is I would select the end here and I would extrude off in this direction. And that would be my tail. But I can select this guy and then symmetrize, move it over there. So you only have to make the bones on one side and just label them correctly. But I can go into my pose mode, and it looks like I already did the work of the IK in here from before. But it's the exact same setup. This guy is an IK, the control is the heel, it's aiming at the knee. If I grab it here, I can move it around. This toe is parented to the heel, but it's onto the shin, so whenever I lift this foot, it's going to stay oriented forward. That way, if I rotate this, I can do a toe tap just with that control. And then did that exact same thing on the other side. In terms of getting some custom controls, what I did is I just went into object mode and made some curve objects. So make a circle, and I'll make myself the general shapes that I want for now. So I'll have one that's a circle. I'll have one for my feet that is that's an oval. I'll just scale that on the X. Bring it in, because I can rescale that when I apply it on there anyway. And if you wanted any other wacky shapes, like I did for the bottom here, I could even right-click on this and subdivide and give myself more points. So if I want this to be heart-shaped, I could. There we go, now I got a heart shape. And then back into pose mode now that I've made those for myself. If I want to change the look of any of these bones, like this guy, I can just go into the bone options. And then for the viewport display, I want it to look like an oval, and I can rotate that whichever direction I need it to go. So 90. And I can move it down. I could scale this up like that. I can do the same thing on this side. I want it to look like that option. 90 degrees, and then I could even go over here and just copy, paste, except that it needs to be negative. It's on the other side. So now the control is shaped like that, instead of the bone sticking out the heel. Again, could do the same thing for these if I just wanted a circle. What I did for the body was I just made it into a circle. And scaled it up. That's a little big. It's just easier to grab than like trying to reach in there and grab that bone. It's the same exact thing. It's exactly the same rotation points. It's just the viewport display is a different object. And this could be, like, literally could be a cube if you wanted it to be, if you wanted to grab a cube instead of a bone. I just like having the curved circles because they're easy to work with.
And what's the, are we only able to move it through that move thing instead of like the move thing? Are we able to use that or?
I don't think so, because this is moving the actual bone. This is just moving the viewport display of where it shows up. So that's why I'm moving it through here. That, make it kind of big, maybe not that big. That was pretty good. Again, this is a bone, it's just shaped like something else. So if I, in pose mode, if I rotate that guy, it'll rotate my bone with it. For skinning, again, object mode, I'm selecting my mesh, I'm selecting my armature. And P will do automatic weights, we'll see how that works out. Go to pose mode. Rotate that around, you can see he's wiggling. If I want to attach an object to a bone, it's like this mushroom cap, I want it to move with my armature, but I don't want it to deform. It's like if you had a hat or if you had something you wanted to attach to it. I can just go down to my object constraints, because what do I want to do? I just want to parent it to the bone, right? So it is a child of my armature. What bone do I want it to attach to? I want it to attach to the head. If it offsets like that, you can just hit set inverse and then it'll snap back in place. So now if I grab my armature and move him around, he should be deforming on what I told it to deform, and this is just parented to the bone. We're out of time, aren't we?
Yes, sir.
All right. Let me stop this recording.